This is a true life story. Before we continue, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the post notification bell to support me for making videos like this. Thank you very much. In the bustling city of Port Harcourt, where the streets hum with the sound of life, there lived a couple who seemed to have it all. Jackson and Nengi were the epitome of a successful Nigerian family. Married for 18 years, they had built a life full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Their twin boys, Isaac and Liam, were the light of their lives, filling their home with joy and playful chaos. Jackson, a self-made plumber, had established a thriving business over the years. His work ethic and determination had earned him a reputation for reliability. Nengi, his wife, was equally accomplished, working as a pharmacist at a respected pharmacy in the city. Together, they were the picture of stability in a city where life could often be unpredictable. Their evenings were typically quiet, time to unwind after long, busy days. On one particular night, after the boys had gone to bed, Nengi and Jackson sat together in their cozy living room, the sound of a generator humming softly in the background as they watched a movie on Netflix. The story was about a young woman who, after years of hardship, joined a high-class escort agency and began earning more than she had ever imagined. As the protagonist in the movie mentioned her earnings, Nengi chuckled and said, "See how someone can earn thousands of dollars in one night, while I spend hours in a pharmacy making a fraction of that in a month." Jackson laughed along, brushing off her comment as light-hearted banter. But little did he know that this seemingly innocent moment would become the seed of a story that would unravel everything they had built together. Over the following weeks, life in the city of Port Harcourt carried on as usual, or so it seemed. Jackson was busy with his plumbing contracts, often rushing between clients in the bustling neighborhoods of GRA and D-Line. Nengi, however, started to change in subtle ways. She began coming home later than usual, claiming that work at the pharmacy had become more demanding. Jackson, always trusting, believed her. But then there were the little things: the new phone she bought, the expensive perfume that hadn't been in her collection before, and the Pandora bracelet that sparkled on her wrist. "You're treating yourself a lot lately," Jackson remarked one evening as they sat down to dinner with the boys. "I deserve it," Nengi replied with a smile, her tone light but firm. "I work hard, and sometimes I just want to enjoy the fruits of my labor." Jackson nodded, letting the comment slide. After all, she did work hard. But deep down, something about the sudden indulgence felt unusual. One Friday evening, Nengi told Jackson she was going out with her boss and a colleague for drinks at a popular spot in the city. It wasn't unusual for her to socialize, so Jackson stayed home with the boys. As the night wore on, he received a call from an old friend, Uche, who sounded hesitant on the phone. "Jackson," Uche began, "I don't know if I should tell you this, but I'm at this bar in GRA, and I just saw Nengi here. She's with some guy I don't recognize, and, well, they look close." Jackson's heart sank. "Are you sure it's her?" "Positive. She's in a red dress, looking different." And Jackson, they kissed. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Denial flooded his mind. This was Nengi, his wife, his partner for nearly 2 decades. Yet when Uche sent a photo, there was no mistaking her. Nengi was sitting across from a man, laughing and leaning in close, her hand resting lightly on his. Without wasting a moment, Jackson left the boys in the care of their neighbor and drove straight to the bar. The streets of Port Harcourt blurred around him as his mind raced with questions, doubts, and anger. When he arrived, his heart pounded as he scanned the room. There she was, Nengi, his Nengi, dressed in a way he hadn't seen in years, heels, makeup, and a dress that revealed more than he thought she would ever wear in public. She was laughing, her hand brushing against the man's arm. "Nengi," Jackson said, his voice low but firm as he approached the table. The laughter died instantly. Nengi's face turned pale as she looked up at him. "Jackson, who is this?" he demanded, cutting her off. The man, clearly uncomfortable, mumbled something incoherent before excusing himself and walking away. Jackson turned to Nengi, his eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and anger. "You're coming with me," he said. The drive home was tense. Nengi sat in silence, her eyes brimming with tears, while Jackson gripped the steering wheel tightly. When they finally reached home, he turned to her, his voice trembling. Tell me the truth, Nengi. No lies, no excuses, just the truth. And so, she told him. Nengi confessed that she had quit her job as a pharmacist months ago. Inspired by the movie they had watched together, she had joined a high-class escort agency. She spoke of how quickly the money came and how intoxicating the lifestyle was. She admitted to meeting clients during the day, and on the nights, she claimed to be working late. I didn't want to tell you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to lose you. Jackson sat in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The woman he had loved and trusted, the mother of his children, had been living a double life. That night, Jackson drove Nengi to her parents' house in Woji. He couldn't bear to look at her, much less speak. The once happy home they had built together now felt like an empty shell. Over the following days, Jackson tried to keep things normal for the boys. He played with them, helped with homework, and tucked them in at night. But inside, he was shattered. He missed her, desperately. Not the woman she had become, but the Nengi he had loved for 18 years. He missed the way she laughed, the way she hummed while cooking jollof rice in the kitchen, and the warmth of her presence. The days that followed Nengi's confession were unbearably heavy for Jackson. He went through the motions of life in Port Harcourt, driving through the busy streets, completing plumbing jobs, and taking care of Isaac and Liam. Yet inside, he felt like a hollow shell. The silence in the house at night was deafening. Jackson would sit in the living room, staring at the spot on the couch where Nengi used to curl up with him. Her absence was a constant reminder of her betrayal. Yet he couldn't deny that he missed her. He missed the sound of her laugh, the way she always knew how to make him smile after a hard day, the warmth of her presence. At times he questioned himself. Could he have done something differently? Was there a moment when he had failed her without realizing it? But no matter how much he analyzed, he couldn't find a justification for what she had done. A week after Jackson left Nengi at her parents' house, she called him. Her voice was soft, almost timid, a stark contrast to the confident woman he had known. Jackson, she began hesitantly, can we talk? Please. I just need to explain myself. He hesitated. Part of him didn't want to hear anything she had to say, but another part, a smaller, quieter part, longed to understand why. They met at a small cafe in GRA, away from prying eyes. Nengi arrived first, dressed simply, her usual elegance subdued. When Jackson walked in, she stood, her hands trembling slightly as she gestured for him to sit. I don't know where to start, she said, her voice cracking. I know I hurt you, Jackson. I know I destroyed everything we built, but I never stopped loving you. Jackson's jaw tightened. If you loved me, Nengi, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to me. You wouldn't have put our family at risk. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. You're right. I was selfish. I was foolish. I let greed and curiosity cloud my judgment. But I swear, Jackson, I never meant to hurt you or the boys. Her words hung in the air, but Jackson couldn't bring himself to respond. He left the cafe, his emotions too raw to process. Port Harcourt, vibrant and bustling as it was, also had a way of amplifying whispers into roars. Within weeks, the story of Nengi's double life began to spread. Jackson could see it in the way neighbors looked at him, the pity in their eyes as they greeted him on the street. One evening, his childhood friend Uche visited him at home. They sat on the veranda, sipping Cold Star beer, as the evening breeze carried the faint scent of diesel from nearby generators. Jackson, Uche began, I'm not here to pry, but you need to know that people are talking. Don't let their words define you. You've done nothing wrong. Jackson nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It's not their words that hurt Uche. It's the truth behind them. Despite everything, Nengi remained a devoted mother. She visited Isaac and Liam every weekend, spending hours playing with them, helping with their homework, and cooking their favorite meals. The boys, blissfully unaware of the full story, were thrilled to see her each time. Mommy, are you coming home soon? Isaac asked one afternoon as she braided his hair. Nengi's eyes filled with tears, but she forced a smile. Not yet, darling. But I'll always be here for you. Jackson watched these interactions from a distance, his heart torn. He couldn't deny that Nengi was still a good mother, but he couldn't forget the betrayal. Over time, Nengi began to rebuild her life. She found a job at a smaller pharmacy in town and started attending church regularly. She made efforts to reconnect with Jackson's family, apologizing to his parents and siblings for the pain she had caused. One Sunday, after dropping the boys off at church for their choir practice, Jackson saw Nengi sitting quietly in a pew, her head bowed in prayer. It was a side of her he hadn't seen in years, a woman seeking redemption, trying to piece herself back together. He felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Respect, pity, hope. Whatever it was, it didn't erase the pain, but it made him pause. Months later, Jackson made the decision he had been dreading but knew was necessary. He filed for divorce. When he told Nengi, her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. "I understand," she said softly. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope, someday, you can remember the good times we had." The divorce was finalized quietly, with no dramatic courtroom battles. Nengi moved into a small flat near her workplace, while Jackson stayed in their family home with the boys. The nights in Port Harcourt grew quieter for Jackson, but no less heavy. While his days were filled with plumbing jobs and the chaos of raising two active boys, the evenings brought solitude. After Isaac and Liam were tucked into bed, Jackson often found himself sitting on the veranda, the soft hum of distant generators filling the air. Sometimes he would replay memories of Nengi, their first date at Isaacboro Park. The way she had looked on their wedding day, her laughter echoing in their old apartment when they were younger and struggling to make ends meet. These moments felt like fragments of another life, one that had slipped through his fingers. Yet he couldn't deny that part of him still missed her. He missed the woman she was before everything changed. He missed her warmth, her companionship, and the way she had always been his biggest cheerleader. But alongside the longing was the weight of betrayal, a wound that hadn't yet begun to heal. For Nengi, life after the divorce was a humbling experience. She moved into a modest one-bedroom flat in Ellenwoe, far from the family home she once shared with Jackson and the boys. The pharmacy job she had taken paid far less than her previous one, but it offered stability and a chance to start over. She spent her days working quietly and her evenings reflecting on her choices. She attended counseling sessions, both to confront the reasons behind her actions and to rebuild herself. One evening, during one of her weekend visits with Isaac and Liam, she sat with Jackson at the dining table after the boys had gone to bed. "Thank you," she said softly, breaking the silence. Jackson looked up from the cup of tea he had been nursing. "For what?" "For letting me see the boys, for still letting me be part of their lives," she replied, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful." Jackson studied her for a moment, seeing a vulnerability in her that he hadn't seen before. "They're your children too," he said simply, before rising to clear the table. Jackson poured his energy into his boys. He coached their football team on weekends, helped them with their homework, and made sure their birthdays were special. Isaac and Liam's laughter became his lifeline, their innocence a balm for his broken heart. Yet, as they grew older, the boys began to ask questions. "Why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" Liam asked one evening as Jackson tucked him in. Jackson paused, his hand resting gently on Liam's shoulder. "Sometimes adults make mistakes," he said carefully. "But that doesn't mean your mommy doesn't love you. She loves you very much." Isaac, listening from the other bed, chimed in, "Will she ever come back?" Jackson sighed, his chest tightening. "I don't know, boys, but no matter what, we're a family. That will never change." One afternoon, Jackson ran into Nengi at Mile 1 Market. She was bargaining with a trader over a basket of fresh plantains, her hair tied back, and her face free of makeup. "Jackson," she said, startled to see him. "Nengi," he replied, nodding politely. They exchanged pleasantries, talking briefly about the boys. As Jackson watched her walk away, he couldn't help but notice how different she seemed, quieter, humbler, almost like the woman he had first fallen in love with. That December, Isaac and Liam had their school's end-of-year party. Both parents were invited, and for the first time since the divorce, Jackson and Nengi found themselves seated together, watching their sons perform in a play. Nengi leaned over and whispered, "They're incredible, aren't they?" Jackson nodded, his eyes fixed on the stage. They are. For a moment, it felt like old times, but as the applause died down and the lights dimmed, Jackson reminded himself that things would never be the same. Months turned into years, and while the pain of betrayal lingered, it began to dull. Jackson found himself thinking less about what Nengi had done and more about the good times they had shared. One Sunday, after dropping off the boys at Nengi's flat, Jackson stayed for a cup of tea at her invitation. They sat on her small balcony, overlooking the bustling streets below. "I've been meaning to say this for a while," Jackson began, his voice steady. "I forgive you, Nengi." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, but it allowed both Jackson and Nengi to move forward. Jackson began to open himself up to the idea of dating again, though he took things slowly. Nengi, too, focused on rebuilding her life and being the best mother she could be. The boys grew older, their lives filled with football matches, school projects, and endless energy. Jackson and Nengi continued to co-parent, their shared love for Isaac and Liam keeping them connected. Jackson had started to embrace the idea of moving forward, but it was a slow process. He often told himself that life wasn't a race, it was about taking each step at his own pace. The first step came when a friend introduced him to Amara, a soft-spoken teacher who worked at one of the local primary schools. Amara was kind, patient, and understanding. She never pried into Jackson's past, but offered a quiet presence that made him feel at ease. Their first few conversations were casual, often revolving around their shared love for books or football. But over time, Jackson began to feel a spark he hadn't felt in years. On one of their dates at the Isaac Burrow Garden Park, Jackson opened up about his past with Nengi. "It's not easy for me to talk about this," he admitted, his voice steady but low. "But I want you to know where I'm coming from." Amara listened carefully, her eyes filled with empathy. "You've been through a lot, Jackson," she said gently. "But the fact that you're here, trying to move forward, says a lot about your strength." Her words resonated with him, and for the first time, Jackson felt that maybe, just maybe, he could let someone new into his heart. While Jackson found himself exploring a new relationship, Nengi continued her journey of redemption. She had grown significantly in the years since their divorce. Her focus was entirely on Isaac and Liam, ensuring they felt loved and supported. She attended every football match, cheered the loudest at every school play, and made sure their birthdays were unforgettable. Despite her own heartbreak and the guilt she carried, Nengi found joy in being present for her boys. One evening, after a particularly intense football game, Isaac pulled her aside. "Mom," he said, his tone serious, "thank you for everything you do for us. I know you and Dad went through a lot, but you've always been there for me and Liam." Her heart swelled with emotion. "You boys are my everything," she replied, pulling him into a hug. Despite the separation, Jackson and Nengi continued to share important family moments. When Isaac and Liam celebrated their 16th birthday, both parents worked together to throw them a memorable party. The gathering was held at Jackson's home, with balloons, food, and music filling the air. Nengi arrived early to help with the decorations, and for a brief moment it felt like old times. As they lit the candles on the boys' birthday cake, Jackson glanced at Nengi. "We did good with these two," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Nengi nodded, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "Yes, we did." As Jackson's relationship with Amara deepened, he introduced her to Isaac and Liam. The boys were initially hesitant, unsure of how to feel about someone new in their father's life. But Amara's warm personality quickly won them over. "She's nice, Dad," Liam said one evening after she had visited. "She makes you smile. That's a good thing." Hearing his son's approval filled Jackson with a sense of peace. Amara wasn't replacing Nengi. She was simply bringing a new kind of light into their lives. One evening, during one of Nengi's visits to the boys, she and Jackson found themselves alone in the kitchen. "I heard about Amara," Nengi said, her tone neutral but with a hint of curiosity. Jackson nodded. "She's different. She makes me happy." Nengi offered a small smile. "That's good, Jackson. You deserve to be happy." The conversation wasn't easy, but it was honest. For the first time, they acknowledged the changes in their lives without bitterness. By the time the boys graduated from secondary school, Jackson and Nengi had found a rhythm that worked for them. Their co-parenting relationship was built on mutual respect, and they both prioritized Isaac and Liam's well-being above all else. At the graduation ceremony, as the boys received their diplomas, Jackson and Nengi stood side by side, their pride evident. "We did it," Nengi whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jackson nodded, a genuine smile on his face. "Yes, we did." As years passed, the pain of the past faded, replaced by a sense of acceptance. Jackson had built a new life with Amara, who had become a supportive partner and a loving stepmother to Isaac and Liam. Nengi, too, found peace in her own way. She remained single, dedicating her life to her children and her work. She often reflected on her mistakes, but she no longer let them define her. Years later, at Isaac and Liam's university graduation, Jackson and Nengi found themselves reunited with their extended families. The event was a celebration, not just of the boys' achievements, but also of the family's resilience. As they posed for a family photo, Jackson stood on one side, Amara by his side, while Nengi stood on the other. The boys stood proudly in the middle, their smiles wide and genuine. Before the boys left for their respective careers, Nengi gave them a small but meaningful gift, a photo album filled with memories of their childhood. "This is a reminder of where you came from," she told them. "No matter where life takes you, always remember your family." The boys hugged her tightly, their gratitude evident. As Jackson watched his sons step into adulthood, he often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Life in Port Harcourt had been anything but easy, but it had shaped him into the man he was today. He no longer harbored resentment toward Nengi. Instead, he saw her as a partner in the most important job of their lives, raising Isaac and Liam. In the end, the story of Jackson and Nengi wasn't one of failure, but of growth, forgiveness, and resilience. Though their marriage didn't last, their family endured. As they gathered for Christmas dinner one year, Jackson with Amara and Nengi seated across the table, there was laughter, love, and a sense of peace. For Jackson, this was enough. Life had come full circle, and he was grateful for every moment that had brought him here. In the vibrant, chaotic city of Port Harcourt, their story had found its resolution, proving that even broken pieces could create something beautiful.